All right, y'all. Welcome, welcome. Welcome to the Unfazed, Unedited podcast, where we provide commentary on complicated topics in an uncomplicated format. I'm Dr. Shaunna Payne Gold, and I go by she, her, hers pronouns. And I am here, of course, with Dr. Lisa. Good to see you. And I know we've got a lot to cover today, right?
We certainly do. My pronouns are she, hers also, and we have a bumper episode. We actually have made a lot of um, executive decisions about what to include and what not to include because we just felt like there was an overwhelming flurry of interesting topics to discuss. So you're going to get three of them today.
Exactly. Right. That's always the issue, Lisa. We have more than enough current events and topics that we can cover. Again, this is all unscripted, y'all. However, we do make decisions on what topic we're going to fly from. So we had more than enough this week. We're still going to encourage y'all to write in and drop comments and ask us questions, of course, that we can add to that list. There's never too many. We'll get to it eventually. But our first phase today is one that really hits home for me because, as many folks who know me well, know I've gone on a natural hair journey, if you will. I used to wear very relaxed hair. I used chemicals on my hair from 12 years old up until I want to say about 30 something ish, 35, 36 ish, until I finally did the big chop, cut all my hair off, and decided that I was going to go natural without those chemicals that a lot of studies have shown have led to breast cancer, more cases of breast cancer in African American women, for example. So lots of different things. I just made an executive decision with my hair. Okay. And so with that, let me tell you, when I hear ongoing stories about hair, and the challenges that African Americans have to deal with, whether it's at work or in educational spaces in regards to their hair, it just grinds my gears, y'all. And so we're going to kind of go back because this is not a new story, but finally we have a trial that's scheduled for February 22nd for Darryl George, who is an 18-year-old junior in Texas, in the Barbers Hill Independent School District. And ironically, Barbers Hill, isn't that ironic, y'all? But anyhow, um, it's a problem here, y'all, because we have an African American young man who has, apparently it looks like, locks that are usually pinned up. Lisa, I intentionally went out there to look for a photo, if he wore his hair down, just to see a photo of the length of it, given that that seemed to be part of the challenge. And the reason why this young man continues to be sent to in-school suspension because of this policy that just is not appropriate for a number of reasons, based on gender, based on race, based on all the things. And so as of June 2023, 23 states enacted their own Crown Act into law. And so Texas has its own Crown Act. And so that's what's being used kind of as a launching pad to challenge why this young man continues to get suspended. Principal Greg Poole took out a full page ad in support of his decision to suspend this young man, and continues to hearken to topics that really don't inform the educational space, whether it's bringing up, for example, West Point. Shout out to all my friends who are alumni of West Point and other military academies, pulling in this notion of conformity from military academies, rigorous expectations of dress. I just think it's ridiculous, Lisa. And so, I thought I would bring it up because it hits home for me for a number of different reasons. Also, too, I have a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old that really want to grow their hair to wear locks in school later on, because they want their dad's hair, and so they want to wear locks as well. And so this easily could be me, except I'm here in Maryland. And so I was wondering if you had heard about the story and really what you thought about the story. Lisa, I know that obviously you have your ponytail coming down. You have longer hair as well. So I just thought, what might you think about this from
hmm
your lens in
hmm
particular?
Yeah, I mean, it's stupid, which is not a very adult critique, right? But I mean, for those who don't know, the Crown Act stands for Creating a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair, and these acts have been implemented across the country because Black and African American people have routinely and continue to experience discrimination based on their hair, right? And so this principal, Greg Poole, is talking about conformity and that that's what you need to do for the good of society. But what he's really talking about is conformity to white standards, right? And so hairstyles have been used to oppress uh, Black and African American people in the workplace in particular, but also now in these grooming policies in schools. It just sounded funny as I said that, grooming policy.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
um, so I'm not surprised to hear it. I mean, I remember hearing about it last summer when it first happened, and it just blows my mind. But based on reading the Crown Act in Texas, so while every state that has one of these acts, they may be written differently. In Texas, it really just prevents discrimination based on the type of hair texture and protective hairstyle that's commonly or historically associated with race. And so that's defined in the law as braids, locks, and twists. It does not address length. And the policy, the school policy, or the district wide policy, I guess, says that for male students, their hair must not extend below the top of the t shirt collar. So for those who are watching this, kind of at the collarbone, right? And but if you have hair that long and it's gathered on the top of your head or it's lifted up so that it's not touching the t-shirt collar, that's still a problem, right? So it's
Right, right,
so that's what the district is likely catching this young man on, right? Is that you have longer hair even though you've put it up and it's very neatly, I mean, I realize neat is also a subjective term, right? But from a white lens, it's a very neat the way he has his hair, right? Um, and it's not sufficient because if he were to let it down, it would touch his shoulders. And so there's
right.
this whole hair policy is like horribly sexist because it also bans ribbons in the hair because that's distracting. Like, well, who's going to have ribbons in their hair? It's probably going to be cisgender girls that have ribbons in their hair, which makes me think of those like cisgender girls can't wear spaghetti straps because that's distracting to the boys. So that feels like that, right? So, I don't, I it is it's stupid because your point is that this has nothing to do with learning outcomes and the learning environment. This young man is a straight A student. He's about to graduate, and this ridiculous charade is absolutely about a presumption about what is right and appropriate, and that any way he wears his hair is going to be unacceptable, right?
Right,
That's what it
right,
feels like to me. It just like blatantly racist behavior.
right, right, right. Exactly. Yeah. And that's what's so challenging about the hair piece, which, anyone who has heard any of our podcast episodes where I have gone on my own rant about black hair needs to understand that even as I'm reading the principal's language about supporting his position on hair, he keeps referring to hair as a style. For Black people, it is not a style alone. It is history. It is tradition. It has been a protective measure. I read somewhere, I forget the exact quote, but someone mentioned how Black hair is like its own museum where it teaches you something. So, for example, even thinking about cornrows, for example, that were actually braided in the shapes of maps to freedom at a certain point in African American history. And so to say that, this is just a style is overwhelmingly simplifying what's going on here, number one. And number two, I still do not understand how conformity actually helps education. I would think that nonconformity would help education because then we could have very interesting conversations about difference and about people's history. It opens up another history book about a group of people if you're willing to have those conversations. And so I think what's really interesting is that It's always okay to conform when it's conforming to whiteness, maleness, and cisgendered maleness. It's never okay to think about either nonconformity or conforming to something outside of those identities. And so for me, it is extremely frustrating to see a high performing African American young man being targeted for hair when there are much bigger fish to fry. I mean, I'm even thinking about Lisa, what does the teachers dress code or any of that look like? Because I'm thinking to myself, if the teachers have to adhere to similar policies, then I'm not sure I know any woman of color that would fit into this job description. Like I could not walk into their school right now as an educator that was licensed and trained because of my hair, because I do wear my hair in a very similar hairstyle when it comes to mohawks and shave very closely. I'll wear a design in my hair, what have you. And so I'm thinking about all the people, not just me, all the people that I know that identify as a global majority in the US, a minority based on power that would not fit this mold. Why would you
Right.
want to do that when we live in a country where there's already a shortage in teachers, where there's already a shortage in or lack of diversity in particular areas of the country? It is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. And to your great point earlier, Greg Poole, this principal, took out a one-page ad in support of his decision about this whole thing. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, how interesting. There's this country phrase, y'all. I know it's not the greatest, but there's this country phrase that says, hit dogs will holler. If you are wrong in any way, shape, or form, but you're still defending yourself and defending yourself loudly, therein lies the problem. You're clearly identifying yourself as a problem. And if it's truthful and defensible, then you shouldn't have to defend it. So I'm like,
Right.
really? You spent that
Yeah.
kind of money to defend something in a
Mm-hmm.
one-page ad? It's terrible. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I hope that things work in the family's favor of the student. Given the tone and the climate of Texas about this, and even the ambiguity around this, I doubt it. Because part of this, Lisa, still reminds me of Brown versus Board. The many years between when things were enacted into law and the gap between then and when people actually started enforcing it. Ask my mom, one of those folks that she was caught up in when they finally decided to enact things. Well, now Texas should have its back against the wall and it's being required to enact or at least consider seriously in real time how the Crown Act should really, happen in real time. And this could be a precedent, a major precedent.
Yeah, I mean, it's Texas. I'm not feeling very optimistic. Sorry
No,
to all
not at
the
all.
Texans out there, but the text of the act also doesn't talk about length, so I could absolutely see a
Exactly.
court in Texas just going on the words of the a textual interpretation, and being
Right.
like, it's perfectly fine, right? Even though it has a disproportionate impact on an already minoritized and oppressed group
Hmm.
of people. And there's no way that's not intentional. Like, no way it's not intentional. So,
Exactly.
anyway.
Exactly. Exactly.
So we will drop a bunch of links into the show notes related to this because we found a couple of good pieces about it that hopefully you will enjoy. So let's shift gears here onto phase two. So we wanted to talk a little bit about the Oscar nominations. It seems kind of funny coming off of phase one, right? The Oscar nominations feel very like inconsequential with everything that's going on in the world, and then this young man's experience of repeated discrimination. However, there are some key nuggets that we wanted to highlight related to those Oscar nominations. So the first one we wanted to talk about is for those of you who have seen the movie Rustin, which is a biography, a biopic about Bayard Rustin, who was pretty central to the civil rights movement and the March on Washington. It's an excellent, excellent movie. And I believe it's produced by the Obama's production company. Is that right?
Yes, it sure is. Yeah, that's right. Hmm.
Yes. So he's been nominated for a number of Best Actors, so Golden Globes, and now an Oscar for Best Actor. So his name is Coleman Domingo. so good, who's so good in that role. But what's interesting and what we wanted to highlight is that he is only the second openly gay man to earn a nomination for playing a gay character at the Oscars, right? So when you think about that, there are a significant number of gay characters that are portrayed in the movies. And a lot of times, at least historically, maybe less so in the 2020s, those characters were portrayed by heterosexual people. So there was a very small pool of gay actors who were playing gay characters who then would be nominated. I mean, I'm thinking about Sean Penn, right, who played Harvey Milk,
Mhm.
and you
Yeah,
know,
yeah. Oh, that's a good
and
one. Yeah.
yeah, and I think he got some accolades for that. I can't remember whether he got Oscar nominations for it, but yeah, so he does not identify as
Hmm.
gay to my knowledge, right? And so it's
Hmm.
these are the pieces around the Oscar nominations that we don't ever think about, right? We don't ever think
Yes.
about the ways
Yes.
in which it yeah, it's people so easily take on identities that are not theirs, and then they get applauded for doing it. I mean, I'm thinking of Hilary Swank in that movie from years ago where she portrayed a trans man, um, and plenty of trans actors that probably could have done that and done that well, right? But at the time, that was just not a thing to do, and I think she got Best Actress Oscar for that. Um,
Right.
or it was at least nominated. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So what do you think about that, Shauna? Because you've
Well,
seen the movie.
Well, now let's think about this at the same time because now folks, listeners, please correct me if I'm wrong. We have the dichotomy here because previously in a previous episode, I kind of hinted around at how wonderful American Fiction was, which also had a number of nominees. Well, to my knowledge, Sterling K. Brown also is not a gay man in real life. However, he is an African American man, and the character in American Fiction is a African American male and his coming out process. So it's like, moving along the spectrum. So, even that, which I adore Sterling in everything he ever plays in. I don't care what it is. He's fantastic. But yet that would be an example of what we're talking about here, where you're getting an accolade, but you're not necessarily part of that community. And so that's all very interesting to me. But yeah, I think it's interesting that Coleman Domingo, big ups to Philadelphia, his hometown. I'm there a lot for work. Coleman Domingo has been working for a very long time. And so he should have gotten his flowers long ago. So I'm so glad to see that happen. American Fiction with Jeffrey Wright and Sterling K. Brown, both up for lead and supporting actor. So both of those. We had, again, it's so interesting, right, Lisa, because I feel like I should be saying we had a good bit of underrepresented folks that were highlighted this year, but at the same time, it's like a drop in the ocean in regards to the totality of the nominations at the very same time. What I think is interesting is that we all, people went over the top about Barbie, but yet, Greta Gerwig and Margot Robbie, neither one got a nod for that movie, but Ryan Gosling did. How about that? America Ferrera, definitely. So I just think it's interesting how we're seeing this increase in representation, but the complexity even within that at the very same time. And so, some folks are of the camp, forget it. Let's just completely divest from these awards, programs, ceremonies, nominations, etc. But I also understand, I read an article, this was last year, this time when the nominations came out, where it's really frustrating for the working actors because they know that it's problematic when it comes to nominations and even award winners. And yet, at the same time, you need those awards and those nominations in order to increase your value in the marketplace so that you can continue to get paid at or close to equitably to your white male cisgender counterparts and their roles. And so it's very frustrating to me. I mean,
Hmm.
I'm like,
Yeah.
yay, I'm like Issa Rae, I'm rooting for everybody black, but yet at the same time I'm like, this is some bullshit overall as a system. And so how can we both be a part of the system yet name all of its flaws? It's pretty clear here. It's pretty clear.
Yeah, and I'm going to say something that might be controversial. I didn't love
Do it.
Barbie.
Do it. Do it. Uh-huh.
And everyone told me I would love it and that it had a good message, and I don't disagree that it had a good message, but I don't I mean, I don't think
Right.
Margot Robbie deserves the Best Actress nomination or Greta Gerwig Best Director for that. I understand the irony of a movie about patriarchy and then the one person, or not
Yeah.
really the one person, because I do want to talk about America Ferrera, but Ryan Gosling is the one that
Yes.
gets nominated, right?
Right.
So that's, that irony was clearly missed. But what this whole big hullabaloo about Greta Gerwig and Margot Robbie not getting a nod um, is overshadowing the fact that America Ferrera did, and
Did.
she's
That's
getting
right.
Best Supporting Actress. And it's just from a little research, she's one of 8 Latinas who have been recognized in this category's history. So out of which it
Mm.
sounds like 2 actors, like the original West Side Story and the
Oh,
2021 West Side
yeah.
Story folks,
Yeah. Yeah.
from there
Mm-hmm.
both won the
Mm-hmm.
supporting actress, and so everyone is getting up in arms that 2 white women didn't get nominated, yet a woman of color, a Latina, who is
Did.
the eighth Latina to be nominated in the Best Supporting Actress category in the whole history of the Oscars, is getting completely overlooked by this 2 white women didn't get recognized, but a white man did. And I
Mm.
still think there's a critique there, but I just don't
Yeah.
think Barbie was that good of a movie, right? Like,
Right. Right.
you
Right.
know,
Right. Yeah.
I mean, like yeah,
I wasn't impressed.
no,
I'm with you. I'm just agreeing. I was not as impressed as I thought I would be.
right,
And
right,
I'm also, as I thought about the lack of nods in certain areas, that always reminds me of that ticker tape list of Black and Brown and Native American actors that I remember that should have gotten nods for
yep,
tons of movies.
yep,
And then
yep,
they finally get the award, or at least get the nominations for a stereotype of our
mm,
community. Like, for example, every time I see this type of situation happen with nominations, I always think about Denzel Washington and how
mm-hmm.
much I felt personally. Y'all write in and agree or disagree with me. How I personally felt like he should have gotten an Oscar long ago, especially for my favorite movie, John Q, which names the ridiculousness of the healthcare system here in the United States. I feel like he should have gotten an Oscar for that role, but he got the Oscar for Training Day, which a lot of people, if you have not seen it, that's an older movie as well. But that was a role where he was a dirty cop, basically. He was playing a dirty cop in a role, and it was a lot of playing into stereotype. Now he played a hell of a character there too. However, the notion of playing a doting father over his son that's dying in a hospital and willing to upset already messed up healthcare systems is not Oscar worthy, whereas playing a gangster cop is Oscar worthy for a black man. I could go down the laundry list of roles of people that should have gotten at least nods that they didn't, and here we are.
Yep, yep. And
Problematic.
then it is problematic. And I would just throw in one last thing before we shift into our final phase is
Yeah.
Greta Lee, who was the lead actress in Past Lives, which I happened to watch on the plane on my way to Puerto Rico. I thought it was a great, great movie. She got a
Yeah.
nod for Best Actress at Golden Globes, I believe, but did not get an Oscar nomination. She's an Asian American woman. Some of you may know her
Ah.
from The Morning Show. Yeah, but
Mhm.
that was a great, great storytelling movie, different kind of movie, right?
Mhm.
And where's the upset about that, right? Where's the outrage around the fact
Yeah.
that she didn't get that either? And
Mhm.
I don't see much of it. So,
No, no. Yeah, so
mm,
that's why I'm like, it's so hard because I do understand the actors' perspectives of trying to, continue to get roles that they want and having a choice of roles to select from, as a result of their Oscar worthiness, award winningness, yet at the same time knowing that there's some major flaws in all this. So well, look, let me touch on a couple things before we kind of wrap things up for this particular episode. I wanted to name a few things. Just a reminder, we talked about what was it, a couple of episodes ago, with Nikki Haley and naming or not naming the reasons for the Civil War. I'm like, oh my God, lady. And so she is still Stirring the pot, stirring the pot. I mean, I can't believe that she's this oblivious, but I just need to name that Nikki Haley said that we're not a racist country and that we've never been a racist country. And I'm thinking to myself, Lisa, you and I must be out there on Pluto somewhere because we're clearly not on the same planet with this person to understand that this entire country was built on the concept of race that was turned into racism. Where's she been at, Lisa? Where's she been at?
I, I don't know. I mean, I'm like, wow, you're digging a hole because you just
Yes,
acknowledged after you didn't acknowledge that the Civil War was based on slavery. So if you acknowledge that slavery happened, how can you then say shortly thereafter that we have never been a racist country? Like, I understand a lot of people now say that we are not currently racist, right? Which I disagree with. But to say
right.
that we've never been a racist
Never
country
been.
after being called out on the fact that the Civil War was about slavery, and then you acknowledge that yes, the Civil War was about slavery, you're like, so slavery wasn't racist? Like, I'm not quite sure then. Okay. Yeah,
Look, I,
anyway.
I use I use the swimming pool example every single time. These people think they can jump into a swimming pool of racism and think that they are not wet. You are. We all are. We are part of this system, right? Let's not act like there's no water in the pool. There's water in the pool here. So yeah, I just wanted to circle back because I know we mentioned that before. So just naming that. But let me give you some local news, Lisa. So I live here in Maryland in Prince George's County. And one of the things that is so sad, again, with all of the violence that happens against trans folks, but I want to name that Taya Ashton was a trans woman that was murdered by Deallen Price back in 2021 here in my county. In my county, they were intimate partners. It was deemed a second degree murder in use of a firearm, and he did plead guilty. Let me be clear on that. He did plead guilty. My issue here with this is a number of different things. I cannot believe yet another trans woman lost their life. And on top of that, this was in response to revealing after they had been dating for a period of time that this person was not born a woman. Okay. And so, given that, pretty much admitted guilt, pled guilty. I am glad that trans panic wasn't pulled out as a legal defense for this particular situation. And at the same time, it's like, come on, this is ridiculous. I'm thinking about Lisa in a dating environment, removing trans from a dating relationship, any intimate partner relationship, taking trans identity out of that. If you did not want to date someone anymore, if you did not want to spend time with someone anymore, why would it connote that you have to take their life? Like, this to me is the most sickening thought pattern I have ever witnessed. And now let me give another bookend to this conversation about Taya's murder. So the murderer, the Deallen Price, was sentenced to 60 years, but 12 years of that was suspended, so left with 48. Um, I have a good friend of mine, Dr. Folks, AC Folks, who's written a book that really does pair nicely with some thoughts around the trans experience called Transgender Inclusion. All the things you want to ask your transgender coworker but shouldn't. I feel like Dr. Folk's book can continue to dispel the ignorance around trans folks, the fear around trans folks. And guess what, y'all? Trans folks are with us, are all around us, have always been all around us. The fact that anyone feels that they need to take someone's life because they don't understand their experience, and other reasons that we don't have enough time to get into at the moment, that to me is disgusting. Disgusting. So on one hand, I'm disgusted by Price, and on the other hand, I'm about 70 pages into transgender inclusion, and I just wish everybody would read it, learn from it, understand it, stop fearing the lived experience of individuals who, as anyone else would want to do, be in a loving, caring relationship with someone. Like, Why does it
Mm,
always seem to trickle
mhm.
down to this effect? It's disgusting. And on top of that, we know that, half of trans women who died from 2015 to 2022, guess who they were killed by? An intimate partner. That's sickening, Lisa. I mean, yeah, it's ridiculous. Sad and
Yeah,
disgusting.
well, phew, agreed wholeheartedly. It doesn't surprise me in any way, sadly. I mean, that is a
Right.
comment in and of itself, right? But
Right.
the desire or the impulse to kill Tyre was, I mean, likely tied to his sense of self and masculinity and what that
Of
means for
course.
him, right?
Absolutely.
Um, I mean, I'm sure that's not all of it, but that's definitely at play there. And
Hmm.
the trans panic legal defense, you mentioned it at the beginning of your
Yeah,
discussion of this, and so that's banned in Maryland, right?
that's right.
But
That's right.
it's for those of you who don't know, it's a legal defense that has been used as a tool to acquit individuals who have murdered trans people because they panicked because the person was transgender, and so then they just freaked out and shot them or beat them or did a thing that ended that person's life, right? And
Hmm.
that's been used. I mean, we don't have the
Right.
stats to share the success rate with that, but it has come up
Mm.
in court multiple times. And just think about that for a second, right? Like, because
Yeah.
I panicked because I'm confronted with a person who doesn't conform, right? Going back to phase one, who is living their authentic life, and that bothers me. Therefore, I freak out and then I cause violence to that person, and I can use that to defend myself. I mean, it's kind of like this like crime of passion, right? Moment of insanity. And those kind of legal defenses as a means to step aside from accountability from the harm that you cause. So, we do see that. And it is being used more frequently, right? And then another comment, I guess I would say, is that this year, 2024, you know, state legislatures across the country, if they don't already have a variety of bills or laws related to trans people and gender identity and gender affirming care, then they're coming, right? And Utah just passed a bill on Thursday. So last week, last Thursday, they pushed it through in about 9 days, from what I understand. And it is requiring folks to use bathrooms, so toilets that are the match the sex that they were assigned at birth, right? Not their gender identity. I think they do get the opportunity to use bathrooms and locker rooms and such of the gender identity that they currently have, if their birth certificate has been changed and something else, which I don't even know that you can do in Utah, and is like really hard, right? So the bar to be able to use the to feel safe when using a restroom or a locker room is like so high it's not even attainable. As an aside, it's not trans related, but Utah also passed a bill related to diversity, equity, and inclusion offices in higher education and in government. And
Uh,
I can't remember the specifics of it, but you can look it up. It's something to the effect of you can no longer have offices on campus that cater to a particular group of people. So, like women or a particular
yeah.
group, African
Yeah.
American, Latinx, they have to be for the success of all students, right? That's essentially it, from what I understand. And then
Hmm.
the other piece that you all may have heard of is Ohio had a bill that passed banning gender affirming care for young people. And Mike DeWine, the
Hmm.
governor there, actually vetoed it because he felt like it was too much of an invasive step into the relationship between parents, a child, and the doctor.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but the legislative majority is so great for Republicans in Ohio, they had enough to override Mike DeWine's veto. So that law is going into effect. And that's just
Yeah.
two examples, Utah and
Yeah.
Ohio, right? And
Yeah.
they're happening everywhere. And this is, and youth sports, gosh, I didn't even mention youth sports, right?
Oh, yeah.
Create
Yeah.
like preventing trans youth from participating in youth sports. So it's not just this violence against trans people and whether or not they're in intimate relationships. It's also about how are we creating the conditions for success and young people to thrive, right? Based on their
Yes.
gender identity and
Yes.
where they are and what makes
Yeah.
most meaningful sense to them. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and Lisa, to go back to what you were mentioning before about, I'm not well versed in the numbers, but let me just share this with you. I looked it up while you were sharing a little bit. So, down at St. Edward's University in Austin, Texas, there's an associate professor of criminal justice that did a study to answer your question in particular around just the numbers here of, success rates using the trans panic defense. Um, what's so interesting about the study is that um, the numbers bear out that no, they're not any more successful using the gay or trans panic defense. And that actually is the least interesting part of the study. What he says is gay men and trans women still remain vulnerable, obviously, to fatal violence. Um, However, the way it plays out in court infringes on victims' civil rights because it flips the script. So, an allegation of sexual assault or violence against those victims who were gay or transgender makes them seem as they were sexual predators rather than the victims themselves. And so, kind of flipping the script on all of that, even behind the numbers itself, it's like, okay, well, who's the victim here? Oh, it's so
Mm,
frustrating. And then it goes in further into the I don't want to get into the details of the type of brutality that's involved, like what's used and so forth. But he even goes into the details of that. So Lisa, I'll drop this study in with some of the other things we post on social media to give you more detail for folks that are listening. But this is a major issue, and frankly, what's interesting is that it doesn't work. You thought you were going to use
yeah.
transpanic. Oh my God, I was so afraid for my life. So I had to take this other person's life, and that's going to be my rationale and my motive. And still doesn't work in court.
Well, it sounds like it works sometimes, but not always,
Not all
right?
the time. Exactly.
So there
And
are
not,
still juries that buy it.
and I would
Yeah,
love to know which states those are in, right? Like
yeah,
what
yeah,
indicate,
yeah,
where that maps out.
yeah.
So anywho, I want y'all to be aware and continue to educate yourself on these topics. Dr. Folk's book is just incredible thus far. Um, I especially want people to think about this in their day-to-day lives, but also at work, because Lisa, one of the things that we've consistently talked about on this podcast is being proactive to creating spaces for everyone with this work and not just simply responding, oh, so Shaunna, the trans whomever shows up, and so now I have to create a space for them. Building spaces in such a way that it's already welcoming. And I think this book speaks to that from that lens. So encourage y'all to think about that. And, think about the families and the loved ones of these trans folks that continue to be disproportionately
Right.
targeted. It's sickening. It's sickening, y'all.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So we'll link to that book also in the show notes. So there's going to be a lot of links in today's show notes for folks because we talked
right.
about a lot of different things. But I think
Yeah.
that's it for this week. That's our phases 1, 2, and
Yeah.
3. As you can see, we had a lot to say. um,
Right.
and we hope you continue the conversation. So if you want to continue the conversation with us, how do they do that? How
Mhm.
do they get a hold of us, Shauna?
Yeah, y'all know what to do now. Y'all, please subscribe at YouTube. It doesn't cost you anything. Just click the button and click the bell, and you'll always get updates from us. Make sure you're subscribed as well. We're on Apple Podcasts. Go to Instagram, LinkedIn. Hey, if you have a question, like a specific real-time question, email us info@unfazedpodcast.com. And of course, you can go to the website to get all the archived episodes as well as the newer ones and share them with folks, your colleagues, your friends, your coworkers, your family members. Share them out with folks. There are things that pop up in everyday conversation that we probably have a podcast on. So share that with them, and we will see y'all next week.
Yep. See you.